Did y'all hear that?
Yeah, we are now recording. So I was telling Kim earlier, I have a lot of content. I could talk for hours on the program because it is, I mean, it's very intricate. There's a lot of different stages to this. It's a big program and it's been going on for almost 20 years already, and we plan on even longer. So there's a lot I can cover. I will be watching that chat. For anybody with questions, I'm encouraging questions and communication back and forth. I want to know what you guys are interested in so I can focus on those sections instead of just covering, briefly on everything. And I don't want it to be like a lecture. I'd rather have it more like a conversation, I guess. So I should first introduce myself. My name is Aaron Schiller. I'm a fisheries biologist that works for the Wisconsin DNR. My station is in Milwaukee out of the School of Freshwater Sciences. We have some space there. And then we work in all of Lake Michigan from about Sheboygan down to the border, down by Kenosha. And then we have inland Ozaukee and Milwaukee counties, which includes the Milwaukee River and the Sturgeon Rehabilitation project we have going on right now. I grew up in West Bend, fishing the Milwaukee River for smallmouth and pike mostly. But when we were kids, we'd bike down to the river and just spend the whole day waiting around fishing, me and my brother. So that really helped, get me interested in wildlife and fisheries and really led me down the path that I am now. So I have, a long background with the Milwaukee River, and I never would have thought to see a sturgeon in there. And now we're starting to see them return as adults for some of our early stocking. So it's pretty exciting, and I hope this is just the beginning, and I know we'll be working with you guys more as it goes on. All right, so we'll start off with just a little outline of the presentation. I'm going to go over the history of the Milwaukee River, just very brief. Not, you guys probably know as much, if not more than I do, about the history of the Milwaukee River, at least around Milwaukee. I'll jump into just some background information on Lake Sturgeon. Then I'll go into the actual rehabilitation program, our rearing facility that we have in Newburgh, and then the stocking and some of our sampling events. And finally, the last thing we'll talk about is that pit tag array. So a big antenna or scanner we just put in the river right off of Urban Ecology Center there. So I'm saving the best for last. But if we still have a bunch of time at the end, we can talk all the details about that. And I'll be happy to take questions along the way or at the end, doesn't matter. So the Milwaukee itself was actually a wetland. There's a big estuary where the three rivers met. So it was a really good location for trade. There was tons of fish making different runs up those rivers. There became heavily manipulated for industry. They put in seawalls and built up just with construction fill and anything they could to build closer and closer to the river so they could ship stuff up and down and use that water as a resource. So many dams were installed. There was dredging, but when you look back at the history of the Milwaukee River, there were records of abundant walleye, sturgeon, northern pike, suckers, whitefish. They say trout just in general. It was probably lake trout that they were seeing in the Milwaukee River in the spring and fall. River spawning fish, which is something unique which we don't see anymore. But this was all evident in the literature, just the documentation of how things were. And with all of these changes, you see an extreme decline in walleye, sturgeon, northern pike. We still have quite a few suckers, but really everything that was using that estuary, as it filled in, there was no more estuary or wetland habitat, which is really important. And then as we put in dams, they couldn't run up the rivers to get to wetland or more riverine stuff either. Lake sturgeon are very long-lived species. It takes them on average 15 years for males to mature and 20 to 30 years for females to mature. And that really depends on their growth rate and some other factors, but a long time. I mean, especially for a fish. So males typically spawn every 2 years after they mature. And then females are usually on a 4 to 6 year cycle, but on average, they spawn every 4 years. So it's not an every year occurrence. So you'll see different year classes on different years return to the river. They need turbulent water and rocky substrate to keep the eggs aerated. Those eggs are somewhat sticky, so they'll stick in the rocks or to the side of the rocks, and they need that flow without sedimentation for them to continue getting oxygen and for them to hatch. And then they need some amount of flow to keep them from getting suffocated in the bottom as well after they hatch. So that, yes.
Can you see the question? How can you tell the males from the females in the sturgeon?
So unfortunately, we can't tell until they're mature and most often like in the river and ripe. So we will actually capture the fish, flip them over, and push on their bellies and just see what comes out more or less. There is slight differences in the vent. The males are more circular, females are more horizontal, but that's not, I would say that's not a easy way to sex them. So normally we're only sexing them if we are able to get gametes out of them. For our data, we don't get a whole lot from that data point, so it's not worth stressing that fish out to try to figure out if it's a male or female. Some of the tracking studies where they put tags in them, if it's important for them to have a male or a female, they'll actually use an ultrasound machine and figure out if there's eggs or milt, and they can see the difference with ultrasound on that. So that's something that Stephen's Point has kind of paved the way on, but I've been part of that. It's pretty cool. We don't have an ultrasound machine for that kind of stuff in Milwaukee here. So they do come back to where they were released from. They have a pretty good homing or imprinting ability. So they return to the river in which they were hatched. There is some straying, and they actually, it's pretty common on the years that males don't spawn for them to be found in other rivers, just checking stuff out, supposedly. We have a bunch of tag sturgeon on the Menominee and Oconto River, the Fox River now, up in Green Bay. And those fish jump around quite a bit, mostly on the years that they're not spawning, especially those males. We do have some, I think 1 or 2 males that actually have left Green Bay. They've gone all the way around Lake Huron and then come back into Lake Michigan. So they really put on some miles, but in general, they do have site fidelity and they come back to the same area. I'll touch a little bit more on that when we get to the trailer section here, the rearing facility. So connecting the two, Milwaukee River became heavily fished because of all the fish that we had coming into the estuary. And then we were severely degrading the habitat. So as you can expect, Lake Sturgeon and other native fish, the populations declined extremely quickly. So our goal with the, with the rehabilitation program is to reestablish a self-sustaining spawning population of Lake Sturgeon in the Milwaukee River. We want them to be able to run up the river, spawn, and we want the river to be good enough habitat for those little ones to hatch, survive in good numbers, and repopulate at least our area of Lake Michigan. Because they used to be in a lot of different tributaries, and now Green Bay is really all that we have left. So to do that, we've been working with Fish and Wildlife and a bunch of other state agencies. And Fish and Wildlife kind of regulates how many we can or should stock, just so we're not flooding any area with a lot of genetics and actually putting too many sturgeon in there. So for the Milwaukee River, our allocation is about 1,000 large fingerlings, and they want us to use river water to raise them if at all possible. So then the second step is developing population assessments to see how our success is. And then we're going to adjust methods to improve survival and return to the river. And then finally, we'll start working on habitat once we think we have enough survival and return of these fish so that so that they can spawn successfully and survive in the river and then return.
So Aaron, what are the benefits of using the river water when you're rearing them?
That goes back to the imprinting. So if you're using the river water, actually, I'll go to the next one. It leads in well. I'll come back to that, Kim. So this is our Streamside rearing facility. It is a hatchery on wheels. It's a dual axle trailer that we have 4 tanks in, and then that's where we bring eggs when we after we fertilized eggs in from the Wolf River fish, and then we can use Milwaukee River water. So this is stationed at River Edge Nature Center in Newburgh. The River Edge volunteers help us run it. We really couldn't do this without them because we can't staff folks to run this. They clean the tanks twice a day, feed the fish 2 to 3 times a day, and they're there if anything happens. So we go up to the Wolf River when they're spawning. We get eggs from 8 females each year, and milk from 5 males for each female, so 40 males. And we fertilize those eggs there, and then we put them in a cooler and transport them back to the rearing facility. So this is what the trailer looks like here. This is after those eggs hatch. We have egg jars that keep water circulating in each of those jars to keep the eggs aerated and from sticking to each other. And they take about 15 days to hatch, depending on water temperature. And then I have a little display on the right here of how they look when they're maturing from 10 days on. So that they look like sturgeon pretty quick actually after they hatch. But using river water, we pump it up the hill to the facility here. It goes through a series of filters. It goes through sand filters, UV filters, to prevent any or as much bacteria and stuff as we can getting into the trailer. The sand filters also pull out a lot of the dirt and weeds and such that are coming up just from being pumped up the river. But those fish, I don't know the mechanism, but they imprint to that water chemistry, temperature, all that stuff. So having it way upriver, they're getting a pretty solid Milwaukee River signature from the chemicals there, just the chemistry of the water. So that our hopes is that they come back with the least amount of straying. They can go check out other rivers, but really when it comes down to it, we want them to come back to the Milwaukee River. And some of the other studies have shown raising them with just cleaned up river water helps that quite a bit. Does that answer your question, Kim?
Yeah, I thought I was pretty sure it had something to do with that, but that's awesome to hear and amazing.
Yeah, I wish I knew how, if it is the chemistry or what they really imprint on. I think would be a really cool thing to figure out, but I don't know how they do it unless somebody can talk to fish. That's going to be a tough one. So going to the stocking, once those fish so we actually just released the fish this last weekend down in the harbor. Once they get, I would say 5 to 6 inches is ideal. We actually clip their right ventral fin so that we know they came from our trailer, and then we put a pit tag in them. So this is a pit tag here. It stands for passive integrated transponder. So it actually doesn't emit anything at all. There's no battery, it's not pinging, there's no tracking. That metal coil that you can see inside of the glass case, when energized, emits a unique 15-digit number. So when I run the scanner over that fish, it'll give me the number 989001, whatever the number is. And that number will be specific to that fish. So that means nothing if anybody else scans it. But if I plug it into my spreadsheet, it'll tell me, okay, this was the fish number 54 that you released this year. It was 6 inches long and 20 grams. And then I can tell what year it hatched and how big it was when we released it. And if we handled it any time between now and that capture, I would have a record of it in that spreadsheet. So these are pretty cool little devices. This is the same thing that they put in cats and dogs. They call it, when you microchipped the dog, this is what it is. It's a pit tag. And when they scan it, that number comes up, they plug it into a database. They actually contact the tag manufacturer who you pay to keep your information handy. And then they give them your name and phone number, and then they contact you. So it's the same type of tag. We're just putting them in sturgeon. Then we put it under, they have some really bony like spine structures for protection. We try to get them under those just so it has less of a chance of coming out. Sturgeonfest is the big release. We bring those fish in a stocking trailer, and then River Edge Nature Center has a whole bunch of displays up. They use it as a big fundraising event, but it's an event where you can adopt a sturgeon. If you donate to River Edge, then you can, or it's a suggested donation. You can hand release a sturgeon into the harbor. So it was this last weekend they actually had to do it. We couldn't do it at Lakeshore State Park like we normally do. All the Summerfest switches and all that kind of threw everything off. So we had it in conjunction with Harborfest. I think it turned out really good. I had a good time. There was a bunch of food trucks there. It really is a great event. If you guys haven't gone to it, I would suggest going down there and checking those fish out. It's one of the few chances that you'll ever get to have your hands on a sturgeon, especially if you don't fish. It's like, that's not something that you get every day. So we have tons of kids, adults. I mean, everybody is coming down there checking out the sturgeon, even if they don't want to release them. And most people that check them out then want to release them. So it is a pretty cool event. I could definitely would anticipate seeing a lot of you guys down there, because there's a bunch of stuff going on. But that's good publicity for the sturgeon as well. A lot of the issues that sturgeon have when they start coming back to the rivers, people don't know what they are. They don't know they're long lived, so they harvest them thinking, oh, I caught a really big fish, of course I'm going to keep it. So it raises awareness. It gives us a chance to kind of reach out to the community and spread the word a little bit. So from the Streamside rearing facility, we started in 2006 with that. We released fingerlings from the hatchery for a few years before that. So we do have fish that are older than that 2006 year class out there. But from the trailer, the ones we really expect to return in good numbers since 2006, we've released almost 20,000 fish. I've divided up by size, but this large fingerlings is really, those are the numbers that we're trying to reach. And we did have some recaps this year. One of them was actually from the 158 fish released in 2007, which was really cool. And I think the other one was like 2011 or 2010. And then one was from the hatchery releases early. So a lot of fish that are coming out of the trailer. It took us, you can see the numbers started off pretty low. It took them a while to figure out how to raise these fish. They are wild. They're not hatchery fish, so they're tough. They get, we have to fight disease. We have to figure out how much and what type of food to feed them, when to add, when to subtract, that kind of stuff. So it took a while for them to get running, but now we got it down to a pretty good science where we know what temperatures they're going to start to be impacted by, and when we can increase and adjust their feed to get the best growth that we can. We want these fish to be as big as possible when we release them, so they have the best chance of surviving. So that brings me to step number 2 is population assessments in the Milwaukee River. So we set gill nets for these fish in and around the harbor. Gill nets are a monofilament mesh net. The black line floats and that green line there sinks. So it sits on the bottom and only stands about 5 feet up off of the bottom. And we set them for less than 24 hours. Most of the time it's about 15, 16 hours. We'll set them in the harbor with a buoy and an anchor on each end, and it'll keep it stretched out. And when those fish swim into it, they have such big fins and such sharp scutes that they just get tangled up in it. It's an entanglement net. So it doesn't, with the sturgeon, it doesn't actually get around their gills very much, but they get wrapped up in their fins and their scutes. So our mortality is very, very low. I think, of the, we've caught, I think we're about 150 fish that we've encountered, and I think we had 1 or 2 mortalities, and that's because the water got really warm. So this allows us to handle a fish years after we release them. So you can tell in the picture there, most of these are 13 inches. I think the biggest one is about 37 inches. So they use that harbor habitat for a while before they leave to go to the lake. So during targeted surveys, this numbers are a little outdated because we got 20 this year alone. 60 of our sturgeon from the trailer have been recaptured during these surveys. We started them in 2013. So they're definitely using the harbor. They're growing very quickly. On average, 4.5 inches per year. And then I just plotted the age at recapture for those sturgeon, and it really looks like they're leaving after, they start to leave at age 4. After age 6, we really don't see them in the harbor. So I think they're getting to the size where they need some more food, some bigger cover, and that's where they head out to the lake and utilize that habitat a little bit more. And once they leave, we really don't know much about them until they come back as adults. And we're just starting to get that data. So if we don't handle, or even if we handle these fish as juveniles, I don't anticipate to see them for at least another, 5 to 10 years. So it's important that we have this data to make sure that the fish we're stocking are surviving and doing well. I will touch on the comment there as we move forward here, but this is just a graph of the pit tag retention. So some years with the gold bars really high, they're holding on to those pit tags very well. And other years they're losing pit tags, or at least the ones we captured didn't have many pit tags in them. So this was an issue for a little while. It seems to be worse on the years that those fish are smaller. They're expelling the tags because it's they're skinnier. So we've improved that quite a bit over the past couple of years, but it is something we're looking at. When we recapture these fish, if they have a clip, that right ventral clip that we give them, and they don't have a tag, we know they're from our program, and we will then give them a tag and assign a tag to them. So we want to be able to track these fish over time. So jump into adult recaptures a little bit here. We did capture 4 fish. We shock every spring up to the North Avenue Dam with the electrofishing boat, targeting these sturgeon and walleyes and any that are left. And we did capture 4 of them from early stocking events and adult transfers. All 4 of those were in 2013. We did see a couple others since then, but in the river, in that lower river there, we really weren't seeing many adults return at all. So we knew we had to go up into the river further and search for them there. And this is where, so far, we've relied on groups like you guys just to keep an eye out for them. So we've had reported sightings at Estabrook and Clutch in 2018, 19, 20. In 2020, one was caught. This is below, I don't remember if that was Clutch or Estabrook, but everybody sent us picture. This sturgeon was caught. In 2020, we had planned on monitoring the river for them, but with COVID restrictions, we couldn't go out and look for them at all, which was difficult because in 2020, we did have Warden go down one day after we had some reports of sturgeon sightings, and he went at night and used his spotlight, and he said he could see a dozen sturgeon below Estabrook. And we couldn't go out there and scan them or do anything about them. So it drove me nuts. But this is part of the reason why we really wanted that pit tag array in, because it scans for those fish at all the times. But anyway, finding these fish is really difficult, especially in low numbers. If only 100 of them come into the river. There's a lot of river there and a lot of deep holes they can be hiding in. It's hard for us to tell really what's going on and evaluate how many fish returned. If water's high, you can't see them hardly at all. So we were just relying on the amount of comments coming in. This spring, we were prepared. We had to follow some restrictions of masks and staying away from the public, but we did get in and we did net 4 adults below Estabrook Falls, which is really exciting. One of them was from the 2005 year class. That was a hatchery stocked fish. That 2007 was one of that 158 that were released out of the trailer that year. And then one was from 2010 year class, also out of the trailer. So we could tell they had a right ventral clip. This one is just a partial. So I had to reclip that one. And then when I scanned them, they had the tags. We did have one fish without a clip and without a tag. So I think that one may have come from a different river, probably a stray from up by Green Bay. But only one of these fish were mature or were ripe. So I could only get milk out of one of them, but just based on the body structure, I think they were all males likely. And they're all younger at that point. So they're growing very fast. When you look at the length, 47 to 55 inches, and some of these fish are like that one fish was 11 years old. At 47 inches is pretty incredible growth for a sturgeon. So they seem to be feeding well out in the lake and hopefully surviving well as well. So we did see some more fish below Estabrook, but they're pretty tough to net or grab onto and get your hands on, especially once you start taking 1 or 2 of them out there. The other ones get pretty smart. So the next step here is adjusting the methods just to help us improve survival, return to the river, increase the amount of information we're getting from them. So that brings me to the pit tag array. This is, it's a very complex piece of equipment or pieces of equipment. Each one of these is 20 feet long. Can you see my cursor?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So each one of those pieces is 20 feet long and 3 feet wide. This piece right there is the node that connects all of these antennas and connects it to the power box and the master controller. So last fall, late fall, early winter, we had a company come in and drill underground from the warehouse building you guys have all the way down to the river. That was the least impactful way to get electricity from the top all the way down to the bottom. So we have, you'll see the big box just next to that pavilion there with some Biomark logos on it. That's our master controller. That's where all the data is collected. And it converts that power to a low voltage DC. And then it runs 750 feet down to the river, where we have 4 of these antennas connected going across the river on the lower stretch. And this is just above that old beaver dam. I don't know if they're still using it or not, that beaver hut. And then this is downstream of the MMSD outflow. And then just upstream, we have 5 of them going across to cover the river. So what these do is they constantly monitor for those pit tags to go over the top. We have, if they're within 2 feet, we should be able to detect that pit tag as it goes over. It energizes that tag, the antenna collects the tag number, the time, and then sends that up to the master controller and records it. Every hour or 2 hours, we have a modem in there that sends out the data so I can see it online. So without going to Urban Ecology Center and downloading data, I can check on that every day when I start work. So this was quite the effort. This is what Kim was referencing before. This summer, we had low water. At that point, it was the lowest water we'd seen since, I would say, since 2019, because we've had a lot of higher water lately, especially in the summer and fall. But it took about 10 DNR staff I have 15 urban ecology volunteers, but I feel like we had more than that. We had quite a few volunteers, which made it really go smooth. And then 2 biomark technicians. It took us 2.5 days to install. And then we had 3 divers to go down and clip all the bolts and sand things off and zip tie stuff just to make sure it wasn't going to catch stuff in the river. So yes, those pit tag antennas, I have it floating in this picture, but when they're installed, actually, if I go back, you can see them in the bottom of the river here, just faintly, underneath that flagging tape. So on a sunny day with low water, if you're in the right spot, you might be able to see them. We'll see how covered they get with sediment, especially over the next winter and spring with that runoff. I expect them to be covered with gravel a little bit, so they're less easy to see, but they are anchored to the bottom permanently. So I anticipate, I hope that those are going to be there for 20 plus years so that we can constantly monitor for those fish. So huge shout out to all the volunteers that helped, because it definitely would not have gotten done in 2.5 days if we didn't have all those volunteers. The biomark guys, so the guys that make that equipment and the technicians they sent down to help us, they were astonished with how organized we were, how everybody worked well together, that, you guys, the volunteers even were following instructions and being helpful. He said a lot of the groups they deal with aren't that way. A lot of people just want to see what's going on, not necessarily help. And even the one morning we had really cold water, everybody was toughing it out to make it happen. So very appreciative of that. So this is just a little diagram showing how they're spanning the river. We don't have it completely getting across on the downstream, and then over on the right side there's a little bit of a drop off that those pipes wouldn't have been able to follow the contour, so we left it off of the bank a little bit there. But we have pretty good coverage, and then there's a brush pile right here as well that I think will kind of push fish over the antenna. So when we did our range detection with the pit tag to see how sensitive the antenna is, depending on where you were, when the ambient noise was low, they were detecting the tags consistently from 21 to 27 inches. Anything inside of that, they were getting 100%. So that's right where it started to fade. And there are a bunch of different factors in that. But if those fish are within 2 feet, I'm fairly confident we'll detect them. For whatever reason, we've had more ambient noise when it's dark outside, and then it gets quiet during the day, which is odd. We're looking into that now that I have a little bit more time. I'm going to start playing with some settings and try to figure that out. But we detected 3 fish within the first week and a half. And they're actually fish that were tagged in 2012 and 2013. And unfortunately, they're not sturgeon. They're red horse and smallmouth bass. So far, we haven't detected any sturgeon, but I also wouldn't have expected them to be in the river at this time of year. Normally, an early fish will run in fall if there's enough water, but most of those fish are coming up in later spring, April into early May is when those fish come up. So no sturgeon so far. We are working on reducing the noise. Just thought I'd share a little bit about like the data that I get when these fish are detected. So here I have the number, the 15-digit pit tag number I was talking about. We have silver red horse. We tagged it for a fish passage study up at Mequon Thiensville. They have one of these pit tag arrays actually in their fishway to evaluate how many fish are actually getting through that were pit tagged at the beginning. So that's why these fish were tagged when they were. So we have 3 of them that we've detected pretty consistently, and that smallmouth bass at the bottom, we detect that fish every week. And lately it's been almost every day. At 6:34 almost every day is when that smallmouth bass goes by. So it's pretty unique to see that daily type of movement from fish around that area. So when I download the data, I get this is a pit tag number in hexadecimal format, which I have to convert the date, the time, and then what antenna number it's on. So when these antennas are scanning for fish, if a fish sits over the top, it can be detected, I think it's 7 times per second. So we can get tons of detections if they're just sitting right on top of that antenna and it sits there turning on and off scanning for them. So you can tell this fish got detected 3 times in a matter of, what is it, a couple minutes here, on different antennas. So it's moving around a little bit. And then if we plot that, just a simple highlight here, we can tell kind of what habitat it's using. If we detect it on this antenna and then it moves up to that one, and then we don't get it again, we can infer that that fish started downstream and went upstream. If vice versa, we can kind of track as we plot their movements, we can track whether they're going upstream, downstream, sitting on top of the antenna. If everything's working great, it can actually put together some pretty cool graphs. So the first sturgeon we get, I'm gonna take the time and put one of those together and try to have a little animation of how that fish moved up, how long it stayed above, and when it came back down. So that's the kind of information we're hoping for. With the sturgeon, we would like to have that kind of information for, say, 100 sturgeon came up this spring, and the peak of the run was, let's say, April 25th. As I watch those numbers go up, I can increase the amount of time that we're spending in the river looking for these fish. And I'll know, okay, there's a whole bunch of them this year. We really got to get out there and look for them. It also helps our wardens and any other volunteers helping us that are spending time down at the river telling people about sturgeon and making sure they're not being caught, snagged, messed with. We want people to come and look at them and be aware that they're there. They're really cool. But until that population comes up, we don't have plans of opening a fishing season for them. We want them to have a chance to repopulate and really get established. So it's important that we know as much as possible about that run, because they are a pretty valuable species. And if somebody catches a fish that's that big, 45, 55, 65 inches, most of the people are going to want to keep it even if they don't know what it is. So having our presence out there is going to be important. And over time, maybe we can work with some volunteers with you guys as well to kind of monitor the area around you, Esterbrook, Clutch Falls, that kind of stuff, and just help spread the word a little bit. Presentations like this help as well. So jumping back to the noise, this is another output that we get from that antenna. And this was the most extreme noise that we had. So it is measuring ambient noise, and this can be a whole bunch of different things. Most of them are electrical, either on the lines or in the river. So those antennas do emit electrical pulses to energize the tags. So if there's metal in the river, it can be energizing that piece of metal and interfering with the potential to pick up the tag. When we were installing the antenna, we found all sorts of metal, pipes, metal rings, you name it, we tossed it out of the river. So there's no shortage of metal in the Milwaukee River. The problem is it's not consistent noise. We have consistent pinging of those antennas, but if it was metal in the river, you would anticipate 20% noise the whole time, right? You wouldn't expect it to change. There's not metal floating down the river, at least as far as I know. And then when you started to look at it, it really peaked in the nighttime periods and slowed down early mornings. So the other way that noise can come in is through the power lines if there's some sort of large pull on that same electrical line. We have an isolation transformer installed. We tried to avoid as much of this as possible, and we tested noise in the river before we installed stuff, and the noise in the river itself is low. So it has to be somewhere outside of the river that makes more or has more interference when it's dark or cloudy outside, which we thought streetlights maybe or security systems, but we haven't been able to figure it out yet. I have some plans to reduce that noise, but when this noise is higher, above 20%, it lowers that detection probability. So the range that tag can be detected at or energized at decreases. So if we don't get this figured out by spring, when those fish are moving in the dark, we're going to get less detections than if they're moving during daylight or when that noise is low. So it's just because it is such intricate equipment, and then we are running electrical lines, 800 feet and energizing a tiny tag, they're very sensitive to this kind of stuff. So we're still detecting fish, it's still working. I just want to make sure we can optimize what we're getting out of this by reducing the noise. There's a question in the chat that says, will the ice and ice heaves damage the antennas? I hope not. We put them in, when we put them in the river, we tried to stay away from the angle of the shoreline where most of the ice scour happens. We kept them, once that bottom was flat, that's where we put them. That being said, there's a lot of debris that moves down that river. So we could have something hit one of those pieces, but we have them anchored in with 8. Each one of those antennas is anchored with 8 duckbill anchors that are 3 feet in the ground. The odds of them going anywhere is extremely slim. And I think so we tried to bury them a little bit just by digging out gravel and such before we put the pipe down. It's 4-inch high density PVC. So if we even got halfway, if the bottom was hitting it there, I'm hoping this section fills up with gravel and rocks in the spring as flows come up and start moving stuff. And that'll help push most of the debris over the top. If something does get hit or cable gets ripped, it is a modular system. So we should be able to just fix that piece instead of having to tear stuff out and redo a whole thing. We should be able to just fix that piece. Or put a new line in and bypass that piece for the spring. And then when the water's low again, we can get in there and change that piece. So we've done as much as we can to anchor and bury the line, each antenna, and everything else upstream or uphill of that point to avoid any damage to this equipment. Another comment in the chat is saying that largest numbers of fish jumping up the stream were at dusk. That makes sense. Most of the movement is in the dark or at low light hours, just because that's when they're comfortable moving. Yeah, Kim. So Kim commented in the chat. She wanted me to just touch on how many of these arrays are in the Great Lakes region. We have one. There's one installed in the Peshtigo River. There's a more temporary one that they put in seasonally at the Menominee River. There's not. So that's it for Wisconsin. The Cedar River got a permanent pit tag array. The Whitefish River got one. This stuff up in Michigan. And then I think there were 2 more. One was run by a tribe, the Little River Band, and then one in Michigan itself. So we're not the only trailer that raises these fish and is part of the program. Like I said earlier, we've been working with other agencies in Fish and Wildlife to kind of spread it around the lake on the rivers that are suitable for it. So there should be about 5 pit tag antennas off of Lake Michigan that are scanning for these tagged fish, and everybody else is tagging their fish too. So with this scanner, we could see fish from Menominee, Peshtigo, Michigan, who knows where they're coming from. But that's one of the big reasons why we want to get this in there, because it's sampling all the time. And we can tag other fish too, like the smallmouth bass and red horse. If there's research questions on smallmouth bass or northern pike, we can tag those fish and watch them go over the same antenna. It's not just specific for sturgeon. The sturgeon program is why we installed it and the main reason we got the funding, but we can use that infrastructure to do other research projects as well. And I think that could be important, especially in other areas of fish passage and seeing community structures change, how fish are now making larger migrations. If we had more pit tag arrays, we'd be able to get a lot of information, fish movement data. So other areas, Kiwani has a trailer as well. I skipped that one, but yes, other areas also release fish, and their pit tag, we won't be able to tell their fish by the fin clip, but we'll be able to tell it's their fish by the pit tag number. So when I scan that fish, we have a combined database where I can plug in that number and it says, Mike Donofrio from Menominee sampled or stocked this fish, or tagged this fish, contact him for more information. And we network and we share all that information when we get somebody else's fish. And then we have annual meetings too, that we get together and we talk about what has been working, with our install, what worked really well, what didn't work, what we're seeing for fish growth. We communicate on all of that so we can focus on the next steps. And then when we're asking for more money for the next step, we all combine as one, write up a big project and ask for money that way. Is there a way fishermen would know a fish is tagged if they caught it? The clipping is pretty evident. The right ventral fin is completely clipped. Some of them regenerate, and that takes a little bit of training to see, but you can usually see where those fin rays make a sharp turn. That's where it's regrowing, is where, like, right where that edge is. But other than that, it's going to be difficult for them to know if that fish is tagged. That fin clip is really important to know if it's tagged. And we've been able to see from some of the pictures of fish we get from Esterbrook or Clutch that right ventral fin is missing. So we knew they were our fish before we even could get our hands on them. Okay, so the next stage for me, at least, big project wise, is acoustic receivers. So these we actually implant the fish with a tag. They can be that big or up to that big, and this type of tag actually does ping, and we can decide when we're buying the tag how frequently it pings, and then the size of the battery determines how far out that ping reaches, how far it's audibly detectable there. So we would set receivers that are constantly listening for those pings at various sites around the harbor and the river, so that we can essentially track those fish. We don't have data on them all the time, but when they're picked up on one of these receivers, we would display it as lighting up green as a detection. So you could see it start in one spot and be detected by the other ones and move to the other. With information like that, we can figure out what habitat they're using in the harbor, when they're in the harbor in the highest numbers, when they're outside of the harbor. There's a lot of dredging and projects coming up right now, and they keep asking, all right, what habitat do juvenile sturgeon use? It's like, well, we think they're using rock and some muck, probably running the edge of both of them, but we're really not sure what they're feeding on, any seasonal movement. So when they're doing construction and dredging, I can't give them input on what to avoid, what things to add for habitat. So this will give us the next step to start evaluating habitat use and seasonal movement, and maybe narrow in on things they're eating. I assume gobies and redworms and other invertebrates, but it's hard to tell until you get your hands on fish or track their movements like this, where you can then go in and do more specific sampling. We've also looked at adult spawning habitat. We've been working with Ozaukee County Fish Passage and some of our stuff to look at likely spawning areas for the sturgeon. So I've shown, there's a quick map here on the likely spawning areas, green being the best. So below Mequon-Thiensville there's a good section. And then most of it is really up as far as they can get with adequate fish passage. up as far as they can get below the Bridge Street and Wire and Nail Dam. So there's a couple green sections down here, but really, I think the majority of the good habitat is up further. So the Clutch Park Dam, Estabrook Falls, right now fish are congregating below there because when the water's not 2,000 or 3,000 CFS, they can't get over it. They're not very good jumpers or burst swimmers. So fish passage at those two locations is very important. Mequon Thiensville got money to redo this fish passage and actually open it up for bigger fish. A lot of that focus was on sturgeon, so they made the channel bigger to accommodate for their movement in hopes that we get adult sturgeon up there. But below there is also good stretch. So that was just quick on adult spawning habitat. Yeah, a lot of barriers have already been removed. I don't know if you guys have been involved in the barrier removal, the fish passage impediments, but any help we get or input we get from the public on those meetings for fish passage is important, because not everybody knows the importance of it, and not everybody cares enough to go to those meetings and voice their opinion. So a little bit goes a long way on those. But fish passage improvement would really open up about twice the amount of river habitat for them, and would increase their spawning habitat. I mean, there's more than 10 times the amount of spawning habitat above Clutch Park as there is below. It's pretty incredible. And those fish, distance-wise, that's a pretty normal swim for them. They'll go much further. Like I said, the one fish we have tagged up in the Menominee did a lap around Lake Huron and came back. So this is nothing for them to swim 20 miles upstream to spawn. There's a question in the chat. What if another fish eats one? I think that was for the pit tag. If another fish eats a sturgeon with a pit tag in it, when that pit tag is in its stomach, we can detect it, and I would think it's the sturgeon. Eventually that fish will pass what's left of the sturgeon and probably that pit tag, and that pit tag will be expelled on the bottom. Another question in the chat, can they get past Clutch Park at all right now? Not our models that have been run evaluating fish passage over Clutch Park is that it takes anywhere from 2,500 CFS to 3,000 CFS before that falls has enough water coming over it, and that water is high enough for those sturgeon to be able to get over that in any consistent manner. You may get one or two above it, but really you need pretty high flows and a pretty ambitious fish to get over that right now. That type of flow does not happen very often. In the spring, even our high water events are 1,500 to 2,500 CFS is pretty high. 3,000 is very high. It does happen, but for very brief periods of time. And maybe once a spring, if that. This last year, it didn't get up that high at all. We may have had one day where they could get above Estabrook, 1 or 2 days, and I don't think there were anything above Clutch. At Estabrook, they can get past at about 1,800 to 2,500 CFS or 2,000 CFS. I think it takes to breach that, and then they go over the right side, right by the beer garden there. There's kind of a chute that has enough water depth, but that's also a stretch of 15 feet, 20 feet that they have to burst swim up. So even the water's fast and coming down there, they got to have a pretty good amount of energy to get over that, and it takes a lot out of them. So even just leveling that Estabrook Falls out a little bit in section will improve fish habitat quite a bit. And when we're in there netting for sturgeon, there's suckers in there that are trying to get up. There's smallmouth bass, and we talk about all these native species and how the impediments are there. And it's different talking about it than when we're in there. I put the net down to scoop a sturgeon, And there were so many suckers that I filled the net and it spooked the sturgeon before I even touched him. And there was only like a foot between me and the sturgeon. Same thing happened with smallmouth bass a week later. There were so many smallmouth bass, they filled my sturgeon net, which is 2.5 feet wide. And they're all sitting there trying to get upstream to find spawning habitat. So the amount of fish that are stopped by those impediments is quite significant. The last step on this would be improving habitat where needed and where possible. The pictures here are just from the Wolf River. This is the bamboo bend area they redid. And now there's sturgeon spawning on that bamboo bend every year. It's a big draw for crowds. We would be following they have some protocols and some steps to evaluate which stretches are good candidates for improvements. And we are going to be measuring some different variables on the river now that we have preliminary work on where we could improve for habitat improvements in the future. Then we'll have to get funding for that. And that'll be a little bit down the road, but that's kind of what we're looking at for habitat improvement. It's just riprap for spawning habitat on bends with enough current. I'm over time here, but I'll just leave this up on the timeline here, just emphasizing the longevity of this project. We're planning on stocking, at least initially, until 2026. So 20 years of stock in there, and then continue the juvenile surveys, spring adult surveys, and adult monitoring for a long time. If we see natural reproduction, then we won't continue stocking or limit it. If we don't see natural reproduction, we'll have to evaluate, is it something we can achieve on the river? Do we keep stocking? We'll have to evaluate from there. But we're looking long-term for this stuff, 20, 50 years in the future.
So you'll be doing it for 50 more years, right, Aaron?
I mean, I don't know if I'll be here for 50 more years. I was hoping to retire a little bit early since I got hired, relatively young, but 20, 25 years, I think I could hang around for 25 years.